brought presents. So bribery, good tweets, please. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about today, the title of my talk is Designing Beyond the Desk, and I'm really glad that I'm following Jackie because a lot of what she spoke about is definitely what I've gone through and continue to go through in the past 3 years. Greg Cardigan is actually 3 years old this month. And it's been on quite a journey, and I look forward to continuing the journey, of course. So I'm a graphic designer. I've been a graphic designer professionally for about 13 years now, and I work at a firm on the east side, Epstein Design. And this is, I think, the journey, though, that every designer goes through, especially after art school. You're in your profession and kind of figuring out where it's going to evolve to, because when you're in school, you're so much about getting a job and being in the field and applying what you've learned, and then you realize that you're still at the core of any designer, I think, as an artist. And that's kind of the journey that I went through, in particular, and it all kind of feeds from my BFA thesis that I created. Was very much talked to that. I spoke on that topic. I think art school can be very departmental, literally in the departments, and I was always fortunate that I dabbled in all the different disciplines, craft and fine arts, and had friends in all the different departments. So I never felt, just that I was a quote-unquote applied artist, as they called it. It was kind of almost a dirty word. And so my BFA thesis, I actually created 5 paintings and then did the design work that incorporated those paintings as if they were in an exhibition. So this has always been something that's been very important to me. And so Greg Cardigan has allowed me to live that because it does apply both of my passions, which is design and artwork and creating imagery. So Greg Cardigan all stemmed from this particular guy, so he's very important to me. So every Valentine's Day, I would design a Valentine for my friends because nobody really gets them beyond the 4th grade anymore. And everybody gets holiday cards at Christmas, and so I wanted to do something that would kind of, spark up the doldrums of the February in Cleveland. And so for maybe 2 or 3 years, I would create a Valentine and send them out. And this is in 2009, I sent out this particular Valentine, and a lot of people were telling me, oh, you need to do your own line of stationery. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, what would I do with stationery? I just didn't know what it would be. And this fell into the hands of my good friend Danielle DeBow, as many of you probably know from Room Service and Judges Union and the Made in the 216 event. So she got this in the mail and she was like, that's it, you're doing Made in the 216. So that was exactly what I needed, because you have to understand this is probably 8 or 9 years out of art school constantly saying, oh, I need to do more artwork again. I need to do more artwork again. And then I got sick of hearing myself say that. And then I got sick of hearing myself say, I'm sick of hearing myself say that. It just kind of was this like constant, like, but as anybody, when you're working, 9 to 5, and as many designers know, it's not really just 9 to 5. Sometimes you just want to, kind of not be in the creative seat, if you will. But I have found that this outlet that Greg Cardigan has given me, it really is, for as much of it as it can be, overwhelming and a lot of work, it's such a good problem to have, as I often say. So this is the very first image that I created. So the thing with 216 is when I was suddenly given this platform, and it was a big deal, and I had no idea what I was going to create. And so these illustrations were nothing like what I had ever done before, which was really exciting and exhilarating, but also frightening and unknown. I didn't know what, oh God, is this the only one I'm going to create? Like, where will I go from this one? So this is the very first image I created, and it really set the tone. And as I went through, this was the direction I started taking, was these very kind of frieze-like figures. There's definitely a lot of inspiration. Immediately everybody asks me, do you love Charlie Harper? Do you love Charlie Harper? And I definitely do admire his work, but it really was not a conscious reflection or inspiration, but I definitely do see the similarities in the way he breaks up his shapes and his forms. But definitely Swiss prints was a big inspiration. And growing up, I always loved Saturday morning cartoons. That was such a big deal. And I think animation is obviously a very big influence in the fact that stories are told in a very simplistic, but at the same time complex way. So it's a lot of things happening on different levels. They're very statuesque. The idea they're almost like paper dolls, the way that they're posed, but there's so much more as you delve into the image. So I'm also very inspired by cinema. I love that in a movie, like one little moment will tell such a story. There was one movie that I saw, it wasn't a very good movie, but I will never forget the scene. It was this woman was stepping onto a boat going to this world she had never gone to before, and the director decided to just focus on her hand touching the railing and her foot stepping off the dock onto the boat. And I've always been struck by that, and I still remember that was, so much was told in just that one frame that 1,000 words couldn't have said. So I think that as a designer in the fine art world, you sometimes stick out. Right away people are like, oh, it's commercially created art, or that it wasn't actually painted, or, so the journey that I've been taking in forging my way into both a commercial art world and the fine art world has been, continuing that theme that I had in my senior show back in 1999. So I'm just going to kind of flip through some images. This was all from that very first line that I created at Great Cardigan. And then, of course, I had to give props to that little guy that started it all. So he became one of the greeting cards that I created. Giving him a new, little reinvented statement, though. I think the designer's advantage that we do have in the art world is that we have that knowledge and that way of thinking, that we give a visual voice to an audience. I think a great example is the 2008 election of Obama. Everybody knows the iconic, Hope poster, and I often can't help but wonder, if a designer didn't do that poster, it would be, a stock photo of Obama. It would have been probably a gradient in it somewhere. They would have used papyrus or some awful font, and he would then have the full definition of hope and why he's going to give you hope. And but no, that was that simple, iconic statement, and that's an example of the importance of a designer, and that's where my whole idea of designing beyond the desk happens. It's so much more than just designing a logo or designing an annual report at your desk, communicating with the client. It is that as well. But what I'm trying to say is that when we step away from the desk and become involved in issues that are important to us, or even just projects that are important to us, you are still a designer when you're not sitting at that chair, in that chair. And designing becomes part of your life. So this is an example of a piece that I did for a good friend, Russell Lee, who's a photographer. He was doing a show at Spin Cycle of his bicycle photography, and he asked me to create the card for it. And then from that, he was like, well, what you should do, this is when Great Cardigan was just a few months old. He's like, well, you should do some prints for the show as well. So I created some pieces for the bike show, and when I did this show, that is when I realized the importance of a connection with an audience. Suddenly there was an engagement there, and there was such a community to the biking culture, and they were responding to my work, and that really just made me realize, not just in the biking culture, but that importance of connecting with an audience, engaging, and then you earn their trust, and no matter what you do with your work, they will go with you on that journey. So as you see, as I go through the slides, in just 3 years that Great Cardigan has existed, the style is slowly changing, from those earlier, not only just the palettes, but just the way that I'm creating the figures. These first ones were always like 3/4 view or full on, and now pretty much I'm always doing these profiles or these semi-profiles. So just, evolving, but the audience goes with you because you've earned their trust. So just some of the images from the bike ride. Speaking of bike culture, the Cleveland Tweed Ride, which I know Alex is out there somewhere. I worked with my good friend Alex and Brian on creating the identity for this year's Cleveland Tweed Ride, which inspired this piece. So this has really not been seen by anyone, so you're all seeing this one first. This is just inspired by that day with the amazing clothing that people would come up. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Tweed Ride. It's basically you get dressed in tweeds from like the early 20th century, and we all go for a ride through the city. And speaking of connecting with someone who likes bikes, so I've been approached. I used to do wedding invites back in the day, and then I kind of swore them off because they're talk about tough clients, especially the mothers of the bride. But I think, and then I kind of got sucked back into it with Grey Cardigan because people started seeing my illustrations and wanting to use it, have a piece done for their wedding. So I'm very careful who I do choose to do wedding invites for, but I do enjoy them when I can engage with a couple that I enjoy working with. And this particular couple, Juliet and Jason, were great. And a bicycle was very important to them. You know, they're cyclists, and he bought her this classic cruiser that she wanted to have depicted in their wedding invite. But I think, you know, the reason I'm showing this is not just to show you, oh, they like bikes, but again, it's that role of a designer. And especially with weddings, you know, you are such a key player in this incredibly important day in their life, and you are their ambassador, in effect. You know, you are giving everybody, all of their guests, their voice and the first impression of their wedding day. And that is, again, what a designer is an ambassador. So here come the brides. So more and more of the bride imagery was people were definitely connecting to that. So when I first started working with Banyan Tree, we created a whole line of just brides. So something borrowed, something gray is what I call the line. This was another wedding invite I did for a couple out in Portland. And this was a great example too of you know, just reaching an audience. I had never met them until maybe a month before they got married because they live in Portland. So it was all the client relations was all done online. It was just they had found my work, and he worked at the Forestry Council in Oregon, and so hence all the coniferous trees. And she had a hummingbird that apparently visits outside her office window every day, and so that's why that was in there. So you know, just understanding and learning about the people, and again becoming that ambassador. And I think, and you can see the style evolving from those first images you were seeing. What's always interesting to me with my characters, you know, a lot of people always, you know, ask me like what's happening behind them. And I think one of the major themes in my work is there's this disparity in the figures. You know, they're connected, but they're not. So there's this like simulcast of harmony and disparity going on at the same time. And again, I think that's a nice metaphor for a designer and a client, finding that voice, cultivating that trust. And no matter if they're a customer, you know, where I'm dealing with customers in a sense, at the same time as clients, being a little bit more on the, you know, Grey Cardigan evolving me more into the retail side of the business. Just kind of gonna go through some of these images. You know, I recently was working, you know, doing an identity project for a client, and they were so afraid to change their logo. They knew it needed to be changed, and I think this speaks again to that trust that I talked about. They were so afraid, like, oh, I don't know what the parents are going to think. It was for an educational institution. What are the parents going to think of this change, or what are the teachers going to think of this change? And they weren't giving themselves enough reverence to themselves for the fact that that audience is going to trust them and trust that they are going to make the decision that they will allow their audience to follow. And I guess that's, you know, what I've been learning. I'm not an expert at it. You know, it's always interesting too when I'm creating these collections. There's always a print I'm like, oh, this is going to be the one. This one's going to totally sell. And then there'll be the one that I almost threw away that tends to be the one that everybody's emailing me about and wanting to get a copy of. A good example of a challenge was working with CLE Clothing and Native Cleveland, which is they have two stores, CLE Clothing, one in Waterloo and now one on East 4th, and I was commissioned to create prints, Grey Cardigan prints with a Cleveland thematic to them. And at first it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, so much of what my work is about is kind of about fashion and clothing and kind of a, you know, a little bit more of a era gone by, and I didn't want to do the obvious, you know, Terminal Tower or West Side Market, but so I threw some thought. I came up with, these are two of the, I think I have 5 or 6 pieces that carry in those shops. And obviously the infamous Lake Erie monster that people still swear exists. And then the West Side, East Side. And this is a really good example of no one's gonna get this. This is kind of, I don't know that this is working. And this is probably one of my most popular prints. People so connect with it in Cleveland. And I actually was recently in a show in New York and they were connecting with it. I think every major city has this infamous West Side, East Side, Hatfield, McCoy mentality going on. So this particular piece here is called In the Details. And I chose to show it. This is a good transition. I think one thing that designers have going for them is we do pay attention to details. Things that, you know, others may not notice or care that we notice, but we definitely have this connection with the smaller things that are in the bigger picture. And that is continuing the designing beyond the desk. I've had the opportunity to do some work with a good friend of mine, Jeff Downey, who's a photographer, and working on styling photo shoots, both models and sets. So these are just some examples of, this is a piece that we did called 216. It was a menswear portfolio that was used as a promotion for Downey Photography. And this just kind of shows my evolution of, you know, working on these prints and my interest in fashion and photography and sets and styling, theatrics. You know, I think my illustrations are very theatrical in a sense. I've always said that they're like a frame from a movie or you know, telling a small part of a larger story. And so styling the photography has really allowed me to take that to a new, basically 3-dimensional format. So basically all of the styling that you see I had done, including the set styling that you see in the background. And then putting the pieces together for the promotional piece is where you step in once again as that two-dimensional designer and telling a story. You'll see there's no words on these pages, but there's certainly a story being told. Again, creating that environment, setting the tone, creating the voice for the clothing that is asking you to speak for it. This is a great example of just example of a great team, you know, working with a photographer, working with a hairstylist, working with a makeup artist, and all coming together, having that vision. And that's what it's been so invigorating for me as a designer is, again, out of the chair, away from the mouse and the screen, and creating a live design. These are stills, I said, from if I were ever to do a live action movie of Grey Cardigan, this would definitely be kind of the look. But I also wanted to show that I'm not only married to those decades, so we totally went 360 for this look as well. And again, the example of working with a team. We actually worked with a designer friend of mine, Garrett, and he was the one who, you know, we worked on the photo shoot and the styling, but then he came in and he worked on the layout, telling the story of the, this was for, I believe, a designer of wedding jewelry. This is an example of this is dovetail photography, which is kind of stemming into the wedding photography, and this is an identity that I created for Jeff. And then these are, once again, an exclusive preview. These will be hitting the streets this Friday at the, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Just some more, this is more set styling. And this is an actual event that I styled. This was actually in my offices. This was for my coworker who's about to get married. So the only reason I'm putting these in there is, you know, design, we're just kind of crazy. You know, everything has to have this presentation to it, and I think what I'm trying to say in showing these, it's not just to show these, it's like find what you love doing and find, you know, a way to use it. And now these are what I was talking about. This is a preview of 2 pieces that are going to be hitting the 216 on Friday. So again, you could just see a big difference from where I started, so who knows where it'll keep going. And that's what I find invigorating. So I wanted to give some time for questions and answers if anyone had them. But that's, what I really wanted to talk about was the ideas of, finding that voice and finding a way to evolve. Because, I think in this day and time where anybody can use a computer program, I think design is in a really weird place right now where budgetary reasons, people are taking things in-house and doing it themselves. And it's important that we continue to put the value on what we do. I know one of the large battles we are constantly fighting is logo contests. You never see contests for do my taxes or, or fight my legal battles. But even the city of Cleveland, I don't know if anyone's familiar, a few years ago there was a logo contest for the city of Cleveland. AIGA actually drafted a formal response to it. And it's a real, I don't know if it's because there's still that perception of doing artwork is easy, and especially if you're a designer and you did it on the computer, that's a simple exercise. I'm sure a lot of you here went to art school. How many of your friends were like, oh, what do you do, draw all day? It's, how hard can that be? And so I think more and more what we're dealing with in terms of the technology that's out there is an endangerment in a sense. So, being able to get our voices out there and show the importance of good design and why an individual or a corporation should be engaging with a designer is important. So, are there any questions?
Do you have a situation where you had a hard time convincing the client with the value of the work?
The question was, have I ever had a situation where I've had a hard time convincing the client the value of the work? Yes, in particular with the wedding invitations. Because at that point in the game, if you think about it, I'm usually engaging with them probably like 5 to 6 months before, and so they've been spending all their money on, and I've literally been told, well, can you come down on this? We've just spent so much on our cake, and, to me, and what I said earlier when I was talking about the wedding invites is, what I say to them is, this is the first impression that your audience is getting up to your event, and that can apply beyond weddings. When you're creating a logo, an identity, a poster, even if it's a piece of artwork, you are putting that image out there for that person. You are, once again, you are that ambassador for what they are wanting you to speak to. And so to answer, I don't know if that's answering your question, but how do you express the value of that? I think it's reiterating the fact that you are a professional. And I think that's what is forgotten, is that designers are professionally trained individuals that are there to perform a service, just like I said, like a doctor or a lawyer would. And it's the time, it's the value of time that we provide in promoting their pieces or their product. Anyone else? Yes.
This could go to Jeff and some other designers that I know, but speak myself included. Where do you find the time to find your voice outside of your 9 to 5?
Yes. Well, evenings and weekends, definitely. Yeah, and like I said before, there's times you're like, oh, I just want to, watch Friends or something. I find myself, it's almost the harder part is jumping in, and once I'm sitting, this is going to go totally against what I'm saying, getting out of the chair, but once I sit down and I start designing or start illustrating, I kind of get sucked in. I think it's kind of that moment that designers have, where especially when it's your own, it's so much easier. at least with Greg Cardigan work, to be passionate about it because it's mine. It's my voice that I'm putting out there, and it's my voice that I'm promoting. I think that's a challenge too that designers have and artists have. And when I say designer, I'm very much talking both design, typical design and artwork creation. Learning how to self-edit yourself and art direct yourself can be a challenge. I think it's a luxury and a challenge at the same time. It's nice to be able to have that freedom of not having to show it to 2 or 3 art directors. But at the same time, you have to be able to have that self-discipline to know, how is this going to react or how is this going to play, and so that's kind of what allows me to invest in that extra time where it would be nice to be outside riding my bike or something, but it's a good problem to have, like I keep saying. To speak more to the idea of what I started with, the whole difference in the worlds of fine art versus designers. I find that more and more, what somebody told me, the advantage that a designer has is that we have that ability to know how to translate what we're doing maybe on a more fine art scale, be it, photography or painting or printmaking, whatever it is you're doing, and we know how to commercially apply that as well, which I think is key. So, like I said, I have some pieces over here, some wrapping paper that's brand new, and some cards, and just wanted to put it out there to thank you all for coming, because I know that you chose to be here, and it's a great event that they're doing this weekend. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my story, and I encourage everybody, no matter what phase you are in your career or in your design journey, as I am, and like I said, for me, this whole thing is very new. And I'm figuring out as I go as well. Definitely, making mistakes and learning from them. And but I think it's key to surround yourself with other creatives, even beyond whatever your situation is. If you're working at a firm, or if you're not even working technically in a design organization or as a designer, if you're doing it on the side, is surrounding yourselves with those creatives. I think for me is when a couple years ago when I was kind of feeling the blah of, feeling like, I don't feel like I'm doing anything, I'm just designing, because it's hard, when you do work at a firm and you do have those key, every now and again you'll get those great projects, but then let's admit it, we all have those boring projects that are, a trifold brochure or an annual report for some company you don't find very interesting. You have to find that outlet, because I think that's, for myself as I think my own design work improved beyond Greg Cardigan by doing Greg Cardigan. It's allowed me to, you look at things in a new way, in a different way, and it just reinvigorates why you do what you do. So that's really it. Wanted to just kind of speak to that idea of going beyond the desk. Not just feeling like if you're not interested in what you're doing at the desk, that there's other outlets, and it's every one of them is individual to the person. And I know that can be cliche, like follow your bliss, but it's because it's not always blissful either. It's definitely you hit those challenges, and kind of what was spoken to in the talk right before mine. I love what she was saying about the comfort zone and getting out of the comfort zone. I think Greg Cardigan, is an proverbial illustration of that, getting out of my comfort zone. When I first started them, I had no idea what they were going to look like, and every time I do a new line, I still don't know what they're going to look like. And then I also have to be careful of, am I imitating myself? You don't want to. My friend Mike, who's a writer, his words always stick with me. He's like, when do you cross that line of not ripping yourself off? So, just that constant, formula of checklist, if you will, that you have to go through in your head. And it's just the idea of, moving on every time. and I don't want to say outdoing yourself, but just making sure that you're always like pushing it into a new place. And I think that's what can be challenging. And what I was talking about the comfort zone was I recently was just so frustrated and flustered, and I was getting ready for a show, and there were just so many technical things about it that I had no idea about, and it was a whole new world. And it was so fitting that day I saw this piece, and it was 2 circles, and the smaller circle said, your comfort zone, and it was right outside the area that said where the magic happens. So I think that's key, is like breaking out of that comfort zone, and knowing that it's gonna not be fun all the time, but that's, you know, just like any growth, it hurts. You know, that's when you know that it's that you're growing, and that's what Greg Cardigan has allowed me to do. It's allowed me to grow not only as an artist and as an illustrator, but as a, you know, a part of the design community. That's the thing about Cleveland, you know, and I'm sure many of you know this, and there's such a great design community here in Cleveland, and of all different, and coming from all different firms and freelancers and photographers. And it's such a great community to be a part of. And I think one of the biggest values that I've gotten out of Greg Cardigan in the past couple of years is you know, not only having that recognition, but having people know to come to you for, it might not necessarily be a project, but to you know, have your consultation on something, you know, or, you know, just kind of the discussion, having the resources around you to, you know, allow the discussion and have people realize the influence that design can have on a city. You know, I think recently Cleveland Public Art and Parkworks came together. They're now Land Studio, and that's a great example of art and commerce and politics and city planning and city involvement coming together. And the power of design, you know, public art and city planning and park planning, design improving cities. And that's what, you know, we're here to do, and that's what our voice is, you know, beyond the desk, you know, beyond the brochure, is that power, you know, of the of design, really. So I'll end there. So.